History doesn't just repeat itself. Sometimes the brightest minds in our past peered across centuries and drew an exact blueprint of the world we are living in right now. 12 of those final chilling predictions are happening dead on schedule. Stick around for number 7, where a 19th century inventor mapped out an interconnected global network that looks less like a theory and more like the internet in your pocket. But first, let's start the countdown with number 1. Number 1. In the early 1500s, while sketching crude designs for flying wings in his locked workshop, Leonardo da Vinci jotted down a note that baffled historians for centuries. He wrote of a time when men would look down upon their own continents from the heavens, not with wonder, but with surveillance. He predicted machines that could hover like birds of prey, tracking every movement on the surface below. Da Vinci called it the Great All-Seeing Glass. He warned that humanity would eventually build a cage of vision, where privacy would become obsolete. Fast forward to today, where low-orbit satellite constellations map every square inch of our planet down to the centimeter, 24 hours a day. He didn't just design the future of flight, he saw the shadow it would cast over modern freedom. Number 2. Centuries before the Wright brothers even picked up a wrench, a brilliant Andalusian polymath named Abbas ibn Firnas looked up at the skies of Cordoba with a terrifying realization. In his final written texts before his legendary, near-fatal flight attempt in the year 875, Firnas didn't just talk about soaring. He predicted that humanity would conquer the air so completely that we would treat the sky like a highway and ultimately use it as a weapon. Firnas wrote that the day man mastered the winds, distances would die, but isolation would take their place. He foresaw a world where people could cross oceans in hours, yet remain entirely disconnected from the ground beneath them. Number 3. By the time Nikola Tesla passed away in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel, his mind was racing with concepts that mainstream science rejected as madness. In his final interviews, Tesla spoke of a future where the entire planet would be wrapped in an invisible web of data. Tesla explicitly stated that pocket-sized devices would soon allow humans to communicate instantly across vast oceans, drawing power and information from a central, unseen source. He wasn't talking about radio towers. He was describing smartphones, global Wi-Fi, and instant messaging, decades before the first transistor was ever soldered. If you want to keep uncovering the truths that mainstream history leaves buried, hit that subscribe button right now. We are just getting started. Number 4. Most people know Michel de Nostradamus for his vague, poetry-driven prophecies of doom. But tucked away in his lesser-known prose letters to his son César lies a chillingly specific warning about the twilight of human intellect. Nostradamus wrote of an era where metal men with artificial minds would begin to write books, compose music, and make decisions for kings and governments. He predicted a time when humans would willingly hand over their cognitive independence to machines, creating a world where intelligence is abundant, but true human wisdom is nearly extinct. Number 5. In the 1200s, English philosopher Roger Bacon was thrown into prison for heresy because his ideas were simply too advanced for his time. Before his death, he left behind a coded warning about the ultimate trajectory of human innovation. Bacon predicted carriages that would move without beasts, ships that would navigate without sails, and flying machines that could carry men across the earth. But his final sentence was the most haunting. He warned that the very tools built to elevate humanity would eventually become the instruments of its quiet, calculated undoing. Number 6. Long before the first mechanical calculator was ever assembled, the 17th century polymath Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz spent his final days obsessing over a binary system of pure thought. He envisioned a universal calculus where all human reasoning, logic, and debates could eventually be reduced to simple combinations of ones and zeros. Leibniz wrote that a day would come when mechanical engines would debate philosophy better than philosophers and settle human disputes through automated calculation rather than blood. He warned that when man stops thinking and lets the machine calculate reality for him, the truth itself becomes programmable. Number 7. Deep in the winter of 1898, an American engineer named Nikola Tesla's close contemporary, Robert Goddard's intellectual predecessor, Jules Verne, was publishing his final exploratory notes on high-speed global transit. But shifting back to real historical inventors, Jules Verne's inspiration, the brilliant French scientist and innovator Denis Papin, left behind a terrifying final theory on subterranean urban transit. Papin predicted that future cities would choke on their own expansion, forcing civilization to burrow deep beneath the dirt into massive pressurized steel tubes. He wrote of sprawling underground networks where humanity would commute in darkness, entirely divorced from natural sunlight, breathing recycled air while moving at the speed of sound through metal tunnels. Number 8. During the twilight years of his life in the late 18th century, Benjamin Franklin spent countless hours experimenting with electrical currents, but his personal letters reveal a darker preoccupation with biological manipulation. Franklin drafted a manuscript warning of a future where medical science would unlock the code of longevity, allowing humanity to artificially extend life well past its natural boundaries. However, Franklin's prediction came with a grim caveat. He wrote that artificial life extension would create a fractured world where only the elite could afford to cheat death, turning aging into a commodity and plunging society into a brutal generational war over resources and space. Number 9. In the final months before his death in 1642, Galileo Galilei sat under house arrest, blind and broken by the Inquisition, yet still mapping out the mechanics of gravity and control. In a smuggled letter to a former student, Galileo warned that as science advanced, the ruling powers of the Earth would weaponize optical instruments and physics to create an inescapable panopticon. Galileo wrote that the telescope would eventually be turned inward, transforming from a tool that looks up at the distant stars into a weapon that looks down to monitor every citizen's daily life. He foresaw a future where privacy was entirely eradicated by lenses that could pierce through walls and track human behavior across entire nations. Number 10. As the brilliant English physicist Isaac Newton spent his final decades calculating the biblical end times based on the books of Daniel and Revelation, he also calculated the physical collapse of global economics. In his private papers, which were locked away for centuries, Newton predicted that rampant fiat expansion and unchecked monetary speculation would lead to a catastrophic global financial reset. Newton wrote that humanity would eventually build a phantom economy detached from any physical value, trading in invisible numbers until the entire system collapsed under its own weight, paving the way for a centralized, totalizing global currency controlled by a single authority. Number 11. In the winter of 19, just months before his tragic and untimely death, computer pioneer Ada Lovelace's intellectual successor, an overlooked British mathematician named Percy Ludgate, finished his final blueprints for an analytical machine that operated entirely on automated logic loops. In his final journal entry, Ludgate warned that machines endowed with recursive logic would eventually develop autonomous goals that could directly conflict with human survival. Ludgate wrote that humanity would become dangerously dependent on invisible algorithmic loops to run power grids, water supplies, and defense networks, creating a fragile civilization that could be brought to its knees in a single afternoon by an error code it no longer understood. Number 12. Finally, in the closing chapters of his life, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, within his final unfinished dialogues, known as the Critias and Laws regarding the fall of advanced civilizations, left a profound and unsettling warning about the ultimate fate of dominant global societies. Plato predicted that any civilization that conquered the globe through technology and rapid communication would inevitably sow the seeds of its own total collapse. He wrote that when man conquers the entire world, he forgets the spiritual and moral foundations that allowed him to survive, leaving behind a hyper-connected, hyper-intelligent wasteland waiting for the final spark. We live in the future they feared, and as these 12 predictions continue to unfold in real time right before our eyes, you have to ask yourself, are we actually steering history, or are we just following a dark script that was written centuries ago? Think about that. See you in the next one.